We've had some amazing conversations this morning, but as Alan said, this is not a gab fest. We're going to put you to work in the working group sessions, and we'll have hopefully some real OKRs, and that we can get some real action out of it. But for now, I want to highlight some of the work that's been done, in the previous CEO initiative, and really since Rome, when we began this Vatican effort and this collaborative to build a new social compact between business and the communities that we serve. And so we're going to highlight some activities undertaken from people who are not in this room, but are members of our community, and they've made some tremendous strides. So we really wanted to acknowledge them and bring them into this room with us. One of them is Carlos Gomez da Silva, CEO of Galp Energia, and he reported back on the success in the focus area of building a planet-first company. In the last 2 years, Galp has supported many volunteer actions, but a highlight is the Terra de Esperanza movement, a partnership between the Galp Foundation and the National Association of Forestry, Agriculture, and Environment Companies to reforest areas that were affected by the forest fires in Portugal, where Galp donated 500,000 trees to native species to the association. And as part of this huge environmental volunteer action, that involved 600 people, employees, partners, and family members in the plantation of 7,500 of those trees. And so they've developed this incredible volunteer platform so they can build this forward and move it forward. So I just want to congratulate Galp Energia, and if we could get some applause for their work. Also would love to acknowledge Daniel Glazer, the CEO of Marsh & McLennan, who reported back on the success of their efforts in developing and training the workforce. And we've heard that actually from a number of you who we aren't going to highlight today because we didn't get either a specific response back, but we would love to keep hearing from you and writing about it in Fortune. But at Marsh, amid the rapid change in finance technologies, Marsh's global finance organization launched its own online finance academy in January of 2018 to support the ongoing learning and development of their finance colleagues who serve important strategic partners for their business. And this academy offers more than 2,300 finance colleagues a place to access and manage their up-to-date personal learning. So let's thank Marsh & McLennan for their effort there. And we have an update from my friend Raj Punjabi, who is the co-founder and CEO of Last Mile Health. And at the Vatican, many of you will remember the working group session that we had there, where we had an amazing response and an effort to fund community healthcare workers in the developing world. At that meeting, he met with Novartis and Johnson & Johnson, and they formed what they call a program to have 50,000 digitally empowered community health care workers in 6 countries to serve 34 million people across 6 countries in Africa. And that is through a digital training program called the Community Health Academy, which will help empower these individuals to spread good health practices, from vaccines to other good hygiene habits, and others, as well as taking care of immediate concerns. They are establishing a very high-quality national community healthcare worker program that can be exported to other countries. And so we want to thank Last Mile Health and Novartis and Johnson & Johnson for their work as well. And now we have a couple of folks who are actually here in this room that are doing some extraordinary things. And I would love to just first turn to Chip Bergh, the CEO of Levi Strauss. Chip?
Thanks, Cliff. First of all, welcome to my hometown here in San Francisco. I'm with Levi Strauss, as Cliff said, President and CEO. We've been around for 165 years, and I actually say that my title is the Chief Values Officer, and I think that's a big part of the reason we've been around for 165 years. But I'm going to touch on 3 programs that we've done, one of which Fortune wrote about last year when we made the Change the World list, which we're really proud of. But that was centered on worker well-being. As you know, the apparel industry has historically chased low-cost labor around the world because it's still largely done manually. So most of our product is made in developing markets, mostly by young women. And we put a program together funded by our foundation initially to work with factory owners to demonstrate that by investing back in their employees and helping them live a better life, that had a positive ROI. And we've demonstrated that a $3 to $4 per dollar invested return on investment. We've advanced that program since last year. Last year, when Fortune wrote about it, we had touched 100,000 workers in our supply chain. We don't own our own plants, so this is all through third-party manufacturers. That number is now approaching 200,000. We've also open sourced that program, and companies like Target and Cardinal Health have also jumped on board. The Harvard School of Business Health is actually doing a study on it to confirm or validate that ROI. And then they will publish later this year the outcomes of that study, and we feel really confident that it's going to demonstrate that kind of a return. So investing back in the workers is a big thing. The second thing I want to talk about, we introduced back in February Project FLX, very oversimplified. Think of this as the centuries-old apparel industry meets the fourth industrial revolution. Product today is still made manually. Everything except for the patterns being cut is done by hand, including the finishing. And if you go buy a pair of Levi's, because I know you don't buy other jeans, if you go buy a pair of Levi's, you know, a lot of people like to buy jeans that are already distressed or look like they've been washed for a couple of years. And to get that finish requires a lot of chemicals and a lot of hand labor. Heavily distressed product, you know, with the holes already in them, you know, buy a brand new pair of jeans and they've already got the destruction in them, can take up to 20 minutes. We're now using lasers. We digitally design all of our product and now can finish that product with lasers in about 90 seconds. It upskills the labor in the plants, in the factories, and it will dramatically make a difference from a sustainability standpoint. We're going to go from thousands of chemical formulations down to literally a couple of dozen and dramatically clean up the supply chain from a chemical standpoint. It also has the potential to hugely impact agility. We can put manufacturing a lot closer to our markets. And then the third thing related to chemicals and related to transparency is we publish a screen chemistry protocol. It's public, it's transparent, it's on our website. We work with all of our suppliers. In fact, Project FLX, the genesis of that program was to figure out how do we remove some of the dangerous chemicals from the supply chain. And we now open source our screen chemistry list as well and are working with our competitors to help them remove dangerous chemicals, harmful chemicals from the supply chain. So 3 big initiatives that we've taken on over the last 18 months or so. We're a company, we talk about profits through principles. We are privately held, can run the business for the long term, and believe that we're making a difference as a result of that.
That's awesome. Thank you. So as Chip knows, I have a heavily distressed pair of jeans that I had that took me 20 years. Oh, no, you have them. They're now in the archive of the Levi, Strauss & Company Museum, which I'm proud to say. That's true, by the way. You know, so Chip talked about ROI and the importance of measuring that. And I want to call on Ernst & Young CEO Mark Weinberger to share a great new project on long-term value creation that you've taken. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And I'd love to know what you do to get your jeans in the Hall of Fame. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, right.
And Chip, every time I see you, I'm so jealous that your business code is jeans for casual. It's so, I hear you. So I was asked just to spend 5 minutes updating for those who aren't aware of a project we're doing. We've seen so much momentum, in part because of what Fortune's doing on trying to move away from short-termism. We are the converted in this room. We wouldn't be here if we didn't believe in it. We have most recently seen momentum with Warren Buffett and Jamie Dimon announcing that the Business Roundtable is trying to move away from short-term guidance. Actually, there's only 28% of the S&P 500 that still issue short-term guidance, believe it or not. 1% in Europe, very, very small amount. But as we all know, as much as we as CEOs and many of us who are publicly traded want to do that, we can't do it on our own because we have capital owners and managers who have invested in us and really give us our money to do what we need to do. And so we have to work with them. So what Lady Linda Rothschild, who's the head of Coalition on Inclusive Capitalism, and I got together a year ago and said, all right, what can we do to help those CEOs who really want to think long-term, who want to try and measure themselves not just on quarterly earnings, which we know in an inordinate amount of time, not necessarily the best measurement of the value we're creating or sustainable growth, which is part of the reason maybe that the average life in S&P 500 company today is only 20 years, down from 40 years. It's getting shorter and shorter because we do manage well short-term, but sometimes we may miss the long-term strategic assets. And Tim Cook said it well. He's focusing on long-term strategic assets, but investors want to know still, how are we doing? What's your return? How do you measure it like we heard from Dor as well? So we pulled together 30 CEOs, $30 trillion in assets under management, so it's bigger than the United States. They're made up of corporates, asset owners, and asset managers, and said, is there any way that these three groups can get together and decide what are some of the long-term value creation things that are unique to companies, unique to industries, and maybe across all of them? Is there any way that you can get agreement whereby if the corporates do it, investors through asset owners and managers will back it up and actually invest based on that? So we have some of the biggest asset managers and owners you could imagine. We got BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, and we got the asset owners. We got pension funds from all around the world, from Japan and Europe and here in the United States, and CalPERS and others, sitting down with corporates and trying to figure this out. And the idea is to come up with some actual metrics that are non-financial, that are provable, and actually these asset owner managers will look at and invest in companies based on them. Things like talent, we talked about, things around brand, governance, purpose, intangibles. As we know today, less than 20% of an S&P 500 company's assets are on its balance sheet because they don't include intangibles. So is it really a measure of value? No. So the hard part is coming up with metrics. It's been a working group for 18 months, CEO-driven. They have to be at the table and have to agree to sign off on it. In November, we're going to try and release. Whether we have any success or not, it's 50-50. I don't know whether we will. I think we're going to make great progress. We're identifying things that they will all come out of the room, we think, agreeing. We will look at these 7 or 8 things like the Larry Fink letter on purpose, like the Larry Fink letter on talking about what matters long term. What Jamie Dimon and Warren Buffett said was not just do away with quarterly guidance, but you need to come up with KPIs that will be explainable and measurable over the long term to investors because they want that transparency. So that's what we're working on. We'll have more for you in November. I can't really say where we are yet because we don't have agreement, but we have dozens and dozens of measures that we're working on to try and distill down. Lots of groups working on it. We're just one of them, and that's my update.
Thank you, Mark.